My name is Mara Quinn. I'm 63 years old, a retired hospital compliance officer who spent 3 decades catching liars with spreadsheets and paper trails. These days, I live in a small apartment on Beacon Hill, exiled, really, from the very house I once called home. Tonight, though, I was back under its roof for one reason. My son's company, Pulse Light, was celebrating its IPO. The living room sparkled with neon uplights and floating AR charts. Investors laughed, raised glasses, toasted to the future. For them, it was a party. For me, it was the moment I'd been sharpening like a blade. And then her voice cut through the noise. Kasia Vale, my daughter-in-law, PR queen-turned-manipulator, leaned close enough for only me to hear. Her smile was sweet, her words poisonous. "You've disgusted me since the very first day we met." 30 years ago, I might have cried, but experience had taught me one thing: arrogance always leaves evidence. So I smiled, calm, steady, ready. I set my glass down and tapped the band on my wrist. The AR projectors around the room blinked awake. Conversations died mid-sentence. Dozens of guests turned as crystal-clear footage filled the walls. There they were, Kasia and Holden Price, the company's CFO and my son's so-called best friend, locked in an embrace inside the Helios Hotel's autonomous car bay. The room froze. Kasia's face bled from smug to white. Holden looked like his heart had stopped. And Illy, my son, stared at the screen like his entire world had just gone up in flames. I stood taller, my voice even, almost gentle. "You say I disgust you, Kasia. Tell me, how does it feel watching everyone finally see who you are?" 2 years earlier, this house was still mine. I had lived there for over 3 decades. My late husband built the deck with his own hands. My garden out back had fed 4 generations. Every beam, every photo on the wall carried memory and sweat. It wasn't just real estate. It was family history carved in wood and stone. Then came Kasia Vale. At first, she was all charm, smiling, calling me Mom, pretending to help in the kitchen. But within weeks of marrying my son, she began rearranging furniture, criticizing the curtains, sneering at my antique china. "This place has so much potential," she told me once, eyeing the cabinet my grandmother had brought from Ireland. "It just needs someone with vision." Her vision meant erasing mine. She complained about the pipes, the appliances, the space. And every time, Illy, my son, just nodded along like a man under a spell. "Maybe she's right, Mom. Maybe the house does need updating." The day my grandson Theo was born should have been pure joy. Instead, it became the beginning of my exile. Kasia announced that new mothers need peace and suggested I spend my days somewhere else while the baby napped. Somewhere else in my own home. When I protested, she pouted. "Illy, your mother is stressing me out. That's not good for the baby." And just like that, Illy turned to me with tired eyes and said the words I'll never forget. "Mom, maybe it would be better if you found your own place, just for a while." My own place. Within 2 weeks, I was packing boxes, carrying my life into a cramped apartment on Beacon Hill, while Kasia and Illy moved into my bedroom, sat at my table, and rocked their baby to sleep under my roof. I remember standing in that tiny living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and second-hand furniture, whispering a promise to myself. "You may have won this round, Kasia, but one day the truth will walk back through that front door, and I'll be the one holding it." At first, I tried to adjust to my new life in that small Beacon Hill apartment. But the silence there wasn't peace, it was punishment. I still visited Theo whenever Kasia allowed. Those short visits became my oxygen. And it was Theo, my sweet 5-year-old grandson, who gave me the first clue. "Grandma," he said one afternoon while coloring at the kitchen table, "Uncle Holden comes over a lot when Daddy's at work. Mommy makes him lunch with candles." Candles for lunch with my son's business partner. I forced my smile to stay in place. "Is that so, sweetheart?" Inside, alarm bells were blaring. After that, I started paying closer attention. One evening, I stopped by unannounced with a casserole. Kasia opened the door after 5 long minutes, hair mussed, lipstick smeared. "Oh, Mara," she stammered, blocking the doorway. "This really isn't a good time. Theo's napping. I was just cleaning." Cleaning, in heels and silk. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Holden's leather jacket tossed carelessly on my sofa. Then there was the smart home system. Illy had connected me as a secondary user years before. He'd forgotten to remove my access. I checked the log out of habit one night. Holden's guest pass had been used on Tuesday, and again on Thursday, always mid-afternoon. Always when Illy was away pitching investors. Patterns don't lie. The final crack in Kasia's perfect mask came at the grocery store. I was comparing frozen pizzas when I heard her laugh, high, girlish, unmistakable. I peeked around the corner and there they were, Kasia and Holden pushing a cart together like a married couple. He slipped an arm around her waist. She leaned into him. At checkout, he paid for everything with his card and then, without hesitation, he kissed her. Not a friendly kiss. A lover's kiss. I gripped the freezer door until my knuckles turned white. The woman who had stolen my son's devotion and my home was now stealing his dignity too. By the time I made it back to my car, my decision was made. I couldn't just be a bitter old woman muttering accusations. If I wanted Illy to believe me, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, evidence so undeniable that not even Kasia's crocodile tears could wash it away. And I knew exactly how to get it. I knew my word alone would never be enough. Illy was too far under Kasia's spell. If I went to him with rumors, he'd dismiss me as bitter, jealous, or worse, vindictive. No, I needed something Kasia couldn't wiggle out of. I needed facts. Dates, pictures, voices, so I called in a professional. Her name was Nessa Calder, a former cybercrime detective who now ran a private investigation firm out of a modest office wedged between a nail salon and a tax service. No neon sign, no drama, just a brass plate that read Calder Investigations. When I walked in, she sized me up in one glance. Gray hair pinned back, hands folded tight, eyes that probably betrayed every sleepless night I'd spent thinking about my son. "Mrs. Quinn," she said, leaning forward across her desk. "Before we begin, you should know something. Cases like this, they rarely end clean. You sure you want to see what's on the other side?" I swallowed hard. I've already seen enough to know something's wrong. I just need proof my son can't ignore. She nodded. Then let's get to work. Within days, she had Holden and Kasia under digital surveillance. The equipment was the kind I'd only read about in compliance reports. Long-range cameras disguised as delivery vans, AI programs tracking their car schedules, even metadata pulled from hotel Wi-Fi networks. All legal, all admissible, all devastating. It didn't take long. By the end of the first week, Nessa called me. Her voice was calm, but the words landed like a gavel. "Your instincts were right. We've documented 3 separate meetings at the Helios Hotel, Tuesdays and Thursdays, exactly when your son is across town with investors. We have photos, timestamps, and matching smart car logs." My throat tightened. Vindication and heartbreak mixed into something sharp. "How long?" I asked. "From what I can tell, at least 6 months, probably longer. They're comfortable, too comfortable for this to be new. 6 months. Half a year of lies carried out under my roof while I was banished to a 1-bedroom apartment. But Nessa wasn't finished. "Mrs. Quinn," she said carefully, "there's more. Holden's not just sleeping with your daughter-in-law. He's been siphoning money from your son's company into private accounts he controls. This isn't just an affair, it's a strategy. And if we don't stop it, your son could lose his marriage, his business, maybe even custody of his child." I sat there in the dark with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the peeling wallpaper of my apartment, betrayal upon betrayal, a marriage poisoned, a business gutted, a child caught in the crossfire, but I wasn't crushed, I wasn't broken, I was furious. And fury, when held steady, is the sharpest tool a mother can wield. I had everything now: photos, audio clips, financial records, even hotel logs with timestamps that matched Holden's so-called business meetings. Nessa handed me the files in a neat encrypted drive, like a judge delivering a sentence. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I knew my son. Illy wanted to believe in people. He wanted to believe his wife was loyal and his partner was honest. If I had gone to him quietly, just the two of us, he would have found a way to dismiss it. He would have said I misinterpreted, that Kasia was stressed, that Holden was just helping. He would have chosen them over me again. And I wasn't going to let that happen, so I waited, patient, silent, watching the calendar until the moment arrived. Illy's birthday. Kasia had been planning the party for weeks, boasting about it to anyone who would listen. Investors, colleagues, socialites, every person who mattered to her image was on the guest list. She wanted a spectacle, a stage, and that was exactly what I was going to give her. I rehearsed the moment in my mind 100 times. The lights dim. The room gathers around Illy, clapping, cheering, raising glasses. Kasia steps forward to give her syrupy little toast, to family, to love, to success. And then, right there, I press one button. No more whispers, no more denials. Just hard, undeniable truth projected in crystal clear definition across every screen in the house. The more I pictured it, the calmer I felt. My hands didn't shake anymore. My heart didn't race. I wasn't just reacting to humiliation, I was orchestrating justice. And when Kasia leaned in at that party and hissed that I had disgusted her from the very first day, she had no idea she was walking straight into her own execution. The night of Illy's birthday arrived like a storm I'd been tracking for months. The house, my house, glowed with string lights and sleek AR projectors cycling through Pulse Light's achievements. Guests in tailored suits and glittering dresses filled every corner. Laughter bounced off walls I once painted with my own hands. The smell of catered steak and champagne clashed with the memory of Sunday roasts I used to cook here. Kasia stood at the center of it all, draped in a gown I knew she couldn't afford, pearls at her throat that once belonged to my mother. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. And then, with a perfectly rehearsed smile, she raised her glass. "To my incredible husband, Illy," she purred, eyes sweeping the room before locking on mine. "You've given me everything a woman could want: a son, a beautiful home, and a future most people only dream of." Guests clapped politely. Illy looked humbled, proud. Then Kasia twisted the knife. "Of course," she added sweetly, "not everyone has been supportive of our happiness. Some people can't let go of the past. Some people are bitter. Some people are simply disgusting." Her gaze burned into me like a spotlight. The room grew tense. I could feel the eyes darting between us. Illy shifted uncomfortably, but as always, he said nothing. That was my cue. I set my glass down on the antique table, picked up the slim remote I'd hidden in my clutch, and pressed a single button. The screens around the room blinked. Laughter died mid-breath. And then the footage appeared. Crystal clear video of Kasia and Holden Price in the Helios Hotel's autonomous car bay, kissing like reckless teenagers, hands where no excuses could explain them. The silence was absolute. Even Theo, sitting cross-legged on the floor, stopped playing with his toy drone. Kasia's face drained of color. Holden's jaw locked, his drink frozen halfway to his mouth. Illy, my son, stared at the images as if his entire reality had just shattered into glass. Kasia lurched forward, her voice cracking. Turn it off right now." I stepped back, the remote firm in my hand, my voice calm, almost kind. "Oh, but we're just getting started." On cue, the footage rolled to the next clip. Timestamps, hotel receipts, a laughing kiss in a restaurant booth. Nessa's work was flawless. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones rose in hands, recording. Every second carved caches lies deeper into the open. Ellie's voice broke the silence at last, low, trembling, dangerous. "How long?" Kasia stammered, mascara streaking. "Illy, it's not." "How long?" Before she could answer, Holden tried to step forward. "Man, I can explain," but Illy exploded, lunging at him. It took 3 men to hold him back as Holden stumbled, crashing backward into the birthday cake. The Queen's crown had fallen, and I hadn't lifted a finger, only a remote. The room was chaos. Illy was thrashing against the arms holding him back, shouting words no mother ever wants to hear from her child. Holden, red-faced and sweating, scrambled to his feet, icing smeared across his suit. Kasia sobbed, mascara dripping like black rivers down her cheeks. And then another voice cut through the uproar. A woman's voice, steady, cold, familiar. "I think everyone here deserves to know the truth." The crowd shifted as Sarah Price, Holden's wife, rose from her chair near the back. She'd been silent all night, watching, waiting. I had invited her myself. After all, she deserved to see what her husband had been doing with her so-called friend. Sarah walked forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She didn't rush. She didn't shout. She simply lifted her hand and delivered the most satisfying slap I've ever witnessed, right across Kasia's tear-streaked face. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Gasps filled the air. Kasia reeled backward, clutching her cheek, wide-eyed. "That," Sarah hissed, "is for sleeping with my husband. 8 months of lies, 8 months of sneaking around while my children asked me where Daddy was." The room erupted in whispers. Phones recorded every word. Kasia tried to speak, but Sarah raised a finger. "Don't bother denying it. I have the divorce papers ready. And thanks to this," she gestured at the screens still glowing with footage, "I'll be taking the house, the accounts, and custody of my kids. You can keep Holden's lies." Holden's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked trapped, cornered, exposed. I stayed where I was, the remote still in my hand, my pulse steady. This wasn't just about Kasia anymore. This was about the rot spreading through every corner of my son's life. And now, with Sarah's words echoing off the walls, everyone could see it for what it really was. The Queen had fallen. The night was disgraced. And the kingdom, my son's future, lay in ruins. But sometimes, ruins are exactly what you need before you can rebuild. The fallout was immediate. Within 24 hours, Illy had filed for divorce. By the end of the week, Kasia was served with separation papers, ordered to vacate the house she'd paraded around like a crown. She went from hosting investor dinners in designer gowns to checking into a budget motel off the freeway, hiding from the cameras that stalked her every move. But Kasia wasn't the type to go down quietly. She lawyered up and demanded half of Pulse Light, claiming she had contributed to its success with late nights, business dinners, and emotional support. Emotional support, while she was sleeping with her husband's business partner. The irony could have filled a courtroom. At the same time, Holden tried to claw back credibility, insisting he was entitled to half the company's assets. His lawyer argued the affair was irrelevant to the business relationship. But the forensic audit Nessa had prepared told a different story. Holden had been siphoning funds, setting up shell accounts, and plotting a hostile takeover. What he called irrelevant, the judge called embezzlement. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Kasia's lawyer, desperate to gain leverage, filed for a paternity test on Theo. She thought it would humiliate Illy, maybe shake him into a settlement. Instead, the results detonated like a bomb. Theo wasn't Illy's son. He was Holden's. I'll never forget Illy's voice when he told me. It cracked down the middle, raw and tired. "Mom, the test came back. Theo's not mine." My heart broke for Illy, for Theo, for the years stolen by Kasia's lies, but then Illy did something that reminded me of the man I'd raised. He straightened his shoulders, wiped his eyes, and said, "It doesn't matter. Biology doesn't make a father. I've been Theo's dad since the day he was born. I'm not giving that up now." It was in that moment I realized Kasia had destroyed her marriage, her reputation, and her schemes for wealth. But she hadn't destroyed Illy. If anything, she had burned away the fog, leaving behind the man he was always meant to be. The courts would sort out the rest. The custody battles, the financial crimes, the headlines splashed across every news feed. But as I looked at my son holding Theo's small hand, I knew the real battle had already been won. The court battles stretched on for months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Holden was torn apart piece by piece. The forensic accounting left no room for excuses. He had funneled company money through shell contractors, moved assets into hidden crypto wallets, and falsified reports to investors. What he called strategy, the judge called fraud. He lost everything: his partnership, his reputation, and eventually his freedom. The state filed criminal charges, and Holden traded his tailored suits for an orange jumpsuit. Kasia didn't fare much better. She walked into court with crocodile tears and designer handbags, but evidence weighs more than theatrics. The judge denied her claim to half the company, citing her collusion in Holden's schemes and her breach of marital trust. What she got instead was supervised visitation with Theo, a reputation ruined beyond repair, and a mountain of legal bills she couldn't possibly pay. Illy, for the first time in years, stood taller. The company survived, cleansed of rot, and slowly rebuilt its credibility. He poured himself into the work, not out of desperation anymore, but out of purpose. And Theo, sweet, innocent Theo, found stability again. Illy fought for and won custody, declaring in court that no DNA test could undo the years he had spent as that boy's father. The judge agreed. "Parenthood," she said, "is proven in actions, not in chromosomes." As for me, I was finally invited back home. Walking through the front door of the house I had been forced to leave, I felt the walls breathe again. The beige paint Kasia had chosen was gone, replaced with warm colors that matched the way it used to be. The garden was alive once more, bursting with blooms where Kasia had let weeds take root. One evening, Illy set down his coffee mug and looked at me across the kitchen, the same kitchen where Kasia once sneered at my outdated appliances. His voice was steady but soft. "Mom," he said, "move back in. This was never her house. It was yours. It always was." I didn't answer right away. I just stood in the kitchen, sunlight streaming across the counters, and realized something. Kasia and Holden had tried to erase me, erase history, erase tradition. But the foundation was still here. And some things can't be erased, not with lies, not with betrayal, not with time. The house was breathing again. And so was I. Life has a strange way of circling back to what's real. A few weeks after the court hearings ended, Illy came home one evening looking nervous in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one Kasia once tried to replace with something modern, and cleared his throat. "Mom, I've been talking to someone." I raised an eyebrow. "Someone?" He smiled faintly, almost sheepish. "Leela Park." The name hit me like a warm breeze. Leela, the brilliant engineer Illy had dated years ago before Kasia sank her claws into him. Leela, who used to spend Saturday mornings helping me weed the garden while talking about her dream of designing spacecraft. Leela, who I thought might have been the one before Illy traded her steadiness for Kasia's shine. "She's Dr. Park now," Illy added, pride slipping into his voice. "She's working at Spaceworks. We've been catching up slowly." I sipped my tea, hiding a smile. "And how does she feel about Theo?" Illy looked toward the living room, where Theo was building a tower of blocks, humming to himself. "She told me any child of mine is a child she could love. That biology doesn't matter." I set my cup down, heart swelling. That was Leela, steady, grounded, real. She had every reason to slam the door on Ali after how things ended, but instead she was willing to walk back in, carefully, on her terms. The first time she visited, I saw Theo's eyes light up when she crouched down to his level, showing him how to make his block tower taller without toppling. Ali watched quietly, his expression soft, almost reverent. It wasn't the look of a man chasing fireworks anymore. It was the look of someone rediscovering home. Later that night, Ali stood by the garden, hands in his pockets, staring at the blooms I'd nursed back to life. "I don't deserve a second chance," he said quietly. I touched his arm. "Maybe not, but sometimes life gives us one anyway, and the only way to honor it is not to waste it." The stars were out that night, clear and bright over Seattle, and for the first time in years, my son wasn't standing in the shadow of someone else's lies. He was standing on his own, and maybe, just maybe, walking toward something good again. Time is a patient healer if you let it be. Months passed after the scandal, and slowly the cracks in our lives began to mend. Pulse Light, once teetering on collapse, steadied itself. Investors returned when they saw Ali's determination to rebuild without Holden's poison. The company wasn't flashy anymore. It was leaner, sharper, honest. And that honesty became its greatest strength. At home, laughter returned to the walls. Theo raced through the garden with his toy drones, chasing butterflies while the flowers I once feared dead bloomed again. His giggles carried through the air like medicine, softening the edges of every hard memory. And Ali, my son, was no longer the man with hollow eyes and shoulders hunched beneath Cash's shadow. He was alive again. Lighter, more himself than I'd seen in years. Much of that had to do with Leela. She didn't sweep in with fireworks or dramatic declarations. She came quietly, carefully, with patience. She visited often, bringing science kits for Theo, late-night takeout for Ali when he was buried in work, and conversations that felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. One afternoon, I watched from the porch as she and Theo knelt in the dirt, planting marigolds along the fence. Theo's small hands fumbled with the seedlings, but Leela guided him gently, never taking over, just steadying him. Ali leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smiling in a way that spoke volumes. Later that evening, after Theo was asleep, Ali said softly, "I don't know what I did to deserve her forgiveness." I looked at him, this man who had nearly lost everything, and shook my head. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about recognizing when someone is finally ready to grow. And Ali, you're growing again. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The look on his face told me everything. The fog was gone. The fire had burned away the rot. What remained was something solid, something real. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe that my son's story wasn't ending in ruins. It was beginning again. It happened on a warm spring evening, almost a year after the truth had come crashing down. The garden was in full bloom, roses climbing the trellis, lavender humming with bees, marigolds lining the fence where Theo and Leela had planted them months before. We'd gathered for a simple family dinner, nothing like the overblown parties Kasha once demanded. Just grilled chicken, fresh salad, and laughter carried on the breeze. After we ate, Theo darted across the yard chasing fireflies, his small hands cupped like he could trap the stars. Leela laughed, her eyes following him, when he suddenly turned to her. I saw it before he spoke. The nervous energy in his hands, the way his voice caught in his throat. My heart knew. "Leela," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket, "I wasted years chasing the wrong things, but through it all, you were the one person who made me feel like myself, like the man I was supposed to be. I don't deserve another chance, but if you're willing to give it, I promise not to waste it." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the gaudy jewelry Kasha used to flaunt. It wasn't about wealth. It was about meaning. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The only sounds were the chirp of crickets and Theo's delighted squeal as he caught a firefly in his hands. Leela's eyes glistened. She didn't hesitate. She slipped the ring onto her finger and whispered, "Yes." Theo ran over just then, holding up his tiny prize. "Look, Daddy, I caught a star." Illy lifted his son into his arms, kissed his forehead, and whispered back, "So did I." From the porch, I felt tears blur my vision, not from sadness, but from something deeper: relief, joy, pride. I had watched my son walk through betrayal, humiliation, and loss. I had watched him nearly destroy himself under someone else's lies. But tonight, under the soft glow of the garden lights, I watched him choose differently. I watched him choose love, the kind that builds, not breaks, the kind that heals, not wounds. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe the future was finally safe in his hands. Life has a way of sorting people into the places they've earned. By the time Ellie slipped that ring onto Leela's finger, Kasha and Holden's world had already collapsed into dust. Holden was sitting in a cell, awaiting sentencing for fraud and embezzlement. His once polished reputation was now a headline: Tech CFO charged in financial scheme. No investors, no friends, not even Sarah, his ex-wife who had walked away with the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, and her dignity intact. Kasha. She drifted from city to city like a shadow no one wanted to claim. After losing her court battles, she was left with no property, no stake in the company she'd tried to steal, and visitation rights so limited she might as well have been a stranger in her own son's life. Even her own family turned their backs. The woman who once strutted through my home like a queen was now begging for couches to sleep on. And yet, I didn't celebrate her misery, because while Kasha and Holden's choices had dug their graves, what mattered most was that my son climbed out of the one they tried to bury him in. I watched Ali every day as he grew stronger. I saw the way he leaned into fatherhood, not out of obligation, but out of devotion. Theo's laughter was no longer drowned by tension. It was the soundtrack of a house at peace. I saw Leela's patience, her quiet steadiness, her way of stitching back the places Kasha had torn apart. She didn't just love Ali. She loved the broken pieces too, and she was helping him put them back together. And me, I was home again. My garden bloomed. My kitchen smelled of Sunday roasts. My walls echoed with real joy instead of Kasha's hollow performance. Sometimes I'd catch myself sitting on the porch at sunset, thinking of all that had been lost: my exile, Illy's pain, Theo's stolen years of innocence. But then I'd hear Illy and Leela laughing in the kitchen, or Theo running barefoot through the grass, shouting, "Grandma, look!" And I'd realize something. We hadn't just survived, we had rebuilt. Stronger, truer, unshakable. Kasha and Holden thought they could erase me, rewrite our story, and claim our legacy as their own. But in the end, all they did was prove what I had always known: truth lasts longer than lies. The seasons turned, and with them so did our lives. 18 months after that night of reckoning, the house stood taller than ever. Fresh paint, polished wood floors, the garden bursting with color. But it wasn't just the bricks or flowers that had been restored. It was the spirit inside. Theo had grown into a lively 6-year-old, chasing butterflies, building rocket ships from cardboard, and asking endless questions about stars. Every laugh of his reminded me that love, not biology, makes a family. Illy walked with his shoulders straight again, no longer bent under someone else's control. He worked tirelessly at Pulse Light, but he also made it home for dinner, for bedtime stories, for mornings spent teaching Theo how to ride a bike. He was a father first, a CEO second, and he was proud of that order. And then there was Leela, steadfast, brilliant, kind. She wasn't a savior, she was a partner. She and Illy didn't pretend the past hadn't scarred them. They acknowledged it, healed it, and chose to build something better. Their laughter filled the kitchen the way Kasha's complaints once poisoned it. As for me, I finally breathed easy. I tended the garden my husband once planted, taught Theo how to bake pies with my mother's recipes, and sat on the porch each evening watching the sun dip behind the Seattle skyline. I was no longer an exile in my own story. I was home. Sometimes Ellie would ask if I regretted it, exposing Kasia in front of everyone, turning her lies into public spectacle. And every time my answer was the same. No, son, the truth doesn't always survive in the dark. Sometimes it needs an audience. Sometimes justice has to be loud. Because the truth is this, I didn't destroy Kasia. I didn't destroy Holden. They destroyed themselves. All I did was hold up the mirror so the whole world could finally see. And in doing so, I gave my family back the one thing those two thieves tried hardest to steal, our future. The night of Ellie and Leela's wedding was nothing like Kasia's grand spectacle. It was small, intimate, held right here in the garden. Strings of lights hung from the trees, the air smelled of lavender and grilled salmon, and the laughter came from real joy, not rehearsed smiles. Theo walked down the aisle carrying the rings, nervous and proud, his little suit slightly crooked. When he tripped over a root, the guests chuckled gently, and Ellie scooped him up without missing a beat. That's when I knew more than ever that fatherhood was about presence, not blood. As I sat among friends and family, watching Ellie slip the ring onto Leela's hand, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself in years. Peace. The house that once echoed with Kasia's cruelty was alive again, with children's laughter, with the sound of music drifting from the kitchen, with the hum of a life rebuilt. The legacy my husband and I began decades ago was safe. Not in property deeds or stock shares, but in something far more enduring. Love that outlasts betrayal. Kasia and Holden had faded into shadows, forgotten by the world, remembered only by the wreckage they left behind. But we remained, we endured, and in enduring we triumphed. That night after the last dance, I sat on the porch with Ellie. Fireflies winked in the dark, the house glowed behind us. "Mom," he said softly, "do you ever regret how you did it, exposing her like that in front of everyone?" I looked at him, my son, steady and whole again. "No, Ellie, because sometimes the truth needs to be undeniable. Sometimes justice needs witnesses. And sometimes the only way to save the people you love is to be willing to be the villain first." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I get it now." We sat in silence, watching Theo chase fireflies with Leela cheering him on from the garden. And I thought, this is what survival looks like. This is what justice feels like. I wasn't just a mother-in-law they tried to erase. I wasn't just the woman they mocked and cast aside. I was the keeper of this family's story. And in the end, the story was mine to finish.